So Bitcoin sank below $100,000 as part of a wider retreat in speculative investments after the Federal Reserve signaled greater caution about the scope for future interest rate reductions. The digital asset fell about 1% to $99,800 as of 10 a.m. on Thursday in Singapore, and that followed a 5.1% drop on Wednesday, the biggest retreat since September. Fed officials lowered borrowing costs for a third consecutive time, but reined in the number of cuts they expect in 2025. And Chair Jerome Powell said more progress is needed on inflation before making further rate reductions. To help us make sense of this, I have Ola Atose, CEO of KoinKoin Exchange. Thank you so much, Mr. Atose, for joining us.
Yes, very good morning to you there, Mr. Onobanjo. It's good to be with you.
Of course, it's nice to have you around too. The U.S. Federal Reserve hinted it might not lower interest rates as much as some had expected. Any idea why the Fed ruled out lowering the rates?
Well, I can't talk too much for what the the Fed decisions are, but if we look at CPI over the last, I think the last few counts, there's been a tick up in that sort of core inflation number. And my view is that the Fed is basing its decision on, whether to raise or drop rates on what inflation is showing, right? So I think the tone set by the Fed chair, Mr. Powell, was that there's a need to be cautious and where necessary, as opposed to dropping rates, we could need to start tightening again. And I think that's sort of the view, which the Fed chair has taken. And of course, that's had an impact on all markets. Not just Bitcoin. We see, similar downturn across, NASDAQ, the Dow Jones, and whatnot. So I think, Bitcoin falling below 100K after reaching a top of 108 earlier on this week, I believe. I think it's just a natural reaction to that news, and obviously speculators, going back into the dollar, for safety. So that's the sort of knee-jerk reaction that we're seeing. But rest assured, Bitcoin has overperformed, this time last year, exactly a year ago. Bitcoin was priced at, I believe, $42,000, dollars. We're now in the $95,000 region. So that's still sort of more than double its value in a year. So I think, yes, there's been a lot of euphoria, or if you wish, Trump-phoria, since the re-election of, Donald Trump. And of course, that's led to what the market's calling the Trump trade. And this sort of reaction that we're now seeing in the market, I think is, again, a knee-jerk reaction, but a reality check, if you wish, for Bitcoin and other assets.
Now, Ola, I like the fact that you mentioned, Donald Trump in this. You and I know that, lowering interest rates usually make it cheaper to borrow money to invest in things like Bitcoin and some other cryptocurrencies. That some way strengthens the crypto system. So isn't the refusal for rate cuts at variance with Donald Trump's plan for the cryptoverse?
Well, not entirely. The word is, obviously until Mr. Trump is inaugurated on the 20th of January next year, we have to wait to see what he will do. The view is there's $200 billion reserve, which the word is will be put into to Bitcoin. That would change things considerably. Whether that will go ahead or how it will work exactly, we are yet to know. So again, I think it's early doors to sort of determine what will happen under the next 4 years under Donald Trump. I think it's early days. Of course, the expectation of the market is, Donald Trump will not be able to influence markets directly, but if there is some approach by the Federal Reserve to consider putting Bitcoin or putting some funds into Bitcoin or making Bitcoin, if you like, reserve assets, that would change things considerably. Now, we don't know if it's going to happen. It's been promised, but again, we have to wait and see.
We understand that the Fed is cautious when it comes to balancing economic growth with inflation and instability, so to speak. But some people feel that the crypto market is the fall guy for this, should I call it, economic policy of the Fed. Do you also see it that way?
Well, not entirely. Not too long ago, if you cast your mind back to 2017, specifically, regardless of what the Fed did or didn't do, Bitcoin did its own thing. And what we're seeing now, that Bitcoin as a digital asset has become, if you like, more of a household name, and even among traditional finance houses, there's a view that they have to take a position or of their portfolio. Bitcoin has to be part of their portfolio. So we're seeing more and more of that. We've got the Bitcoin ETFs and whatnot. So what we're seeing is as Bitcoin becomes more of a traditional asset, we are seeing we're now in a world where whatever happens to other markets will happen to Bitcoin, right? So if the Fed comes out and raises rates or talks about tightening, we will see a pullback in Bitcoin. Given the sort of trend we've seen since election day till today, I believe it's been sort of how many weeks now? 5, maybe 6 weeks. Bitcoin has gone up by almost $35,000. This pullback, I believe, is just a necessary reaction, as one would expect in any healthy, market, for any asset, if you like. So that's my view. I believe, the digital assets, all of them, Bitcoin included, are here to stay. And, I think we should wait to see what happens, over the next, over the next month with the inauguration of Donald Trump.
It's quite interesting. When the Bitcoin hit about $100,000 mark, people felt or said it was a speculative bubble for that particular currency, but then we don't know how it will be able to be resilient, how it will be resilient when it comes to the policies of government and what the Donald Trump administration will be bringing on board. But then now that we're seeing a drop, do you foresee any long-term complication, from this Fed's cautious approach to future interest rate cuts for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, so like all assets, I think a lot of investors are taking sort of a long-term approach with Bitcoin. They see that Bitcoin has done quite well since its inception in 2013, I believe, or maybe a little earlier. And a lot of investors, again, are taking that long-term approach. They're not willing to sort of look at Bitcoin and say, well, hey, it's dropping, we've seen a drop. Should we be concerned? That sort of stuff. Look, this happens in all markets. It's happening to Bitcoin right now. For your seasoned investor, they're taking a long-term approach. A lot of the larger funds, have allocated a small part of their portfolio to Bitcoin, and their exposure to Bitcoin, again, is limited. But of course, we have to look at the fundamentals of Bitcoin, and some of those fundamentals are fairly straightforward. There'll only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. There's a limited supply. So ultimately, over the long term, regardless of what cycles the Fed is going through, there is expected to be a continued rise in the price of Bitcoin. And of course, the psychological level of $100,000, whilst that's, a point to be made, I still think that on the sort of long term and the outlook of Bitcoin is pretty good. We're still more than double where we were this time last year. So I think a lot of traders and investors are looking at that as, thus far good news for Bitcoin.
Okay, so I know you're a player in the industry, so I'd like to just get your own advice as regards to this, because if interest rates remain high and Bitcoin's price continues to fall, investors will still have to repay their loans, and that would significantly amount to losses in some way. So what would you advise investors now to do?
Well, we don't provide direct advice, of course, but I can give my opinion.
Of course.
Um, and my opinion is we've seen what I choose to call the Trumphoria since the re-election of Mr. Donald Trump, and that Trumphoria, that Trump trade has pushed us from the lows of $72,000 on election night to $108,000 earlier on this week, right? So that's a huge rise. And my view is like all markets, there has to be a cooling period. There has to be, a relief rally, if you like. And relief rallies such as the one that we're seeing now, sort of this pullback, in the market, is always, as a result of a fundamental, and the fundamental put forward by the Fed is caused this reaction in the market. So my view is we have to look at the technicals where the market is. We saw the rise from roughly $73,000, from election night over the last sort of 5 to 6 weeks. Let's be cautious. Let's be realistic. We expect it's not too much to expect that Bitcoin will fall back to a support area or support zone. Right now, we know that we have support zones. I think $90,000. There's another one at $85,000, and then beyond that, you've got that sort of $77,000 to $79,000 region. Bearing in mind that a lot of folks would still like to get in. If we see further drops in Bitcoin, we expect there to be a buying frenzy, certainly over the Christmas period. Into next week, if we see further drops, it's very possible that, we see a lot of buying, into sort of Christmas and into the end of the year, which is typical with these markets where we could have what we typically call the Santa rally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's sort of a day-to-day view. Long-term view, I would say, is Bitcoin is still a buy. I would urge caution right now. Again, this is my opinion. I would urge caution. We see Bitcoin pulling back potentially to that pre-election levels, which would be quite a lot if we go back to the sort of $77,000, $79,000. It is possible that happens just before inauguration or post-inauguration. And that's the view that a lot of, professional traders and investors have right now. Okay. So my advice would be caution. Folks should not be hasty to get in even at these levels and wait for us to sort of go back to that support level and look at where we were post-election, pre-election. Even if we go back to the sort of mid-70s, we're still in, what's technically called a bull market. So again, now is not necessarily the time to sort of go in and buy at the top, as they say, but perhaps, take a step back for now and look for, the lower support levels where you could sort of go in and get Bitcoin at a much cheaper price. Okay. And again, a lot of traders and a lot of investors across the world will be looking out for that opportunity.
Okay. All right. In your comments, about 3 times you talked about Trumphoria. I'd like to get more insights into that in relation to the U.S. Bitcoin Strategic Reserve that President-elect, that is Donald Trump, actually proposed.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's sort of, well known among investor circles and, traders alike that, the man Donald Trump has the Midas touch. Whatever he talks about seems to go to the moon. And I think that's sort of the Trumphoria, this effect he's had, since since we've been since obviously he's since his re-election. And, the view is that is going to continue. The promises are out there, what he's promised to do. But like all investors, we have to wait to see, what the approach will be. Will we really get Bitcoin as a, reserve asset? Is that really going to happen? Will the Federal Reserve take that approach on the Donald Trump? Look, we still don't know, right? There's no reason for us to absolutely believe that it will go ahead. But for based on what Donald Trump and some of his immediate, senior advisors have been saying, they have a pro-crypto sub cabinet, and the view is yes, we will be going ahead and seeing that, Bitcoin as a Federal Reserve asset. And again, where that happens, we can expect, the price of Bitcoin to continue to rise. But where we are right now, the only thing that's priced in is the re-election of Donald Trump, the promises that he's made, and of course, reality check is the fundamentals of inflation and what the cautious Fed would choose to do. So that's sort of how I see it.
Okay, so I guess that's why you keep saying we need to wait and see how it would pan out probably in the next few months, pending the time Donald Trump comes on board as the president of the US, to see how his policies and his ideologies will bring about resilience and growth for the crypto markets in the nearest future. Well, we just have to wait and see. Ola Atose, CEO of KoinKoin Exchange, it was nice talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.